Well, welcome to this month's Ask Your Herb Doctor July 21st, 2023 edition of the live stream radio show directly from KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM. From 7 p.m. till 8, we'll be live, and from 7:30 until 8 o'clock, we'll be taking callers who'd like to call in with any questions related to this month's continuing endocrine discussion with reference to the parathyroids and bone health and herbs that are shown to improve osteoclastic activity and reduce a bit other way around. What am I talking about? Okay, osteoblastic activity at building and osteoclastic activity that dissolves bones. So been away for the last month and I won't say I've lost it, but hey, okay, it's excitement of the moment. So it's July 21st, 2023. And like I said, from 7:30 until 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in with questions about this month's subject or other questions if you so wish. You're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, and on the web at www.kmud.org. Like I said, we're live streaming this program to our Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel, so you can listen live right now on our channel by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on the YouTube, and click on the live stream. So like I said, tonight's radio show, part 5, actually part 6, sorry, it's a continuation then of endocrine hormone physiology and herbal medicines that can modulate that activity. Okay, so my name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
So we're both licensed medical herbalists who consult with clients with a wide range of conditions, and our website is westernbotanicalmedicine.com. You can visit our site to see a list of our organic medicinal herb tinctures, and our contact details are there also. Alternatively, we can be reached on our toll-free number 1-888-WBM-HERB. Our Western Botanical Medicine Twitter account is at WBM-HERB, and our YouTube channel is, as I said, Western Botanical Medicine. And links to both our Twitter and YouTube channel are also on our website at westernbotanicalmedicine.com. Okay, so part 6 of endocrinology and bone health. I think I'll first just start off by outlining traditional Chinese medicine has a pretty good handle on the interactions and physiological application of medicinal herbs. And I think we have, certainly, Plato and Aristotle and all of the kind of Greek physicians, philosophers, alchemists were certainly right up there. But traditional Chinese medicine has at least a 2,000-year history, and the dynasties of China were basically repositories of information, and their physicians were well versed in diagnosis of different illnesses, different from the Western diagnosis forms, and their interpretation also was very different. And I find it's a very fluid and very romantic approach to explaining away a disease. It's certainly way more poetic, and I think there is such a harmony in Chinese herbal medicine philosophy that it really draws a beautiful picture about the description of a process which would be known in the Western world as a pathology of this, that, or the other, and given a various root cause, whereas the Chinese look into the origins of disease in very different ways, and they have their meridians, and acupuncture is a big deal in China to unblock energy. And that we also understand, I'm sure most people listening to this show are kind of have their eyes open enough to know, and their ears open, to understand that, as I've always said, it's not just a physical world, it's very much a spiritual world that we live in, and we are energy. And just as sound is energy in terms of sound waves and its action on things, the quantum world and quantum mechanics has recently elucidated what I think most people have intuitively felt, that the energy of life on this planet, in this plane of existence, is very fluid, dynamic, and can be interpreted in an artistic fashion to explain things away that otherwise science has a hard time dealing with. So just to cover quickly a traditional Chinese medicinal formula, for osteoporosis, given that that's the subject of discussion. Let's see here, there's 6 herbs. Okay, so mostly Chinese traditional medicine formulas are what they call polypharmic. So sometimes there's 12 or more herbs, 12 to 15 sometimes. From a Western perspective, as I was trained in herbal medicine in England, it's a little difficult for me to see that very small doses of something are going to be effective, because in terms of the pharmacopoeia, whether it's the English, British pharmacopoeia or the European, German pharmacopoeia, a lot of the material that's used in herbal medicine has a kind of minimum and maximum therapeutic dose. And so, and those doses are kind of what I would call dose realistic in terms of eliciting a pharmacological response from a tissue in response to treating somebody with a different, certain pathology. So whilst their polypharmic formulas may only have a 5 ml content of one herb, 2.5 ml of another one, and out of 10 or 15 herbs makes up a 120 ml formula for a week. The dose there, if you look at it from a Western perspective, would seem to be ineffective. It would seem to fall outside of the parameter of efficacy for its pharmacological activity and its intended use. So anyway, this just a short aside. Chinese traditional medicine is usually polypharmic, whereas kind of traditional Western botanical medicine seems to more or less gravitate towards 5 or 6 different herbs in the formula, 20 ml of each one, and as a 1-in-2 extract would definitely be plausible in terms of its efficacy. So enough said about that, because this formula does actually have 6 ingredients in it, but I think there were probably 7 to 10 originally, and some of these that I pulled out for other reasons of explaining their activity, because they have pretty good monographs describing their activity. So let me just quickly cover them, and then we'll go through them kind of one at a time. So Epimedium grandiflorum, or Epimedium sagittatum, otherwise it's known as horny goatweed. So most people have heard about this product. It's definitely touted as an aphrodisiac, and it also has osteogenic activity. So that's Epimedium. And then teasel root. Now, teasel is not specifically Chinese, obviously, but the Chinese do use herbs that occur in Europe and in America, and they're not specifically Chinese, but it kind of works both ways. So the root of teasel. And then next is Salvia militarizia, which, is a Chinese sage, otherwise known as Dan Shen, or red sage root. The next one is Amanarina asphalloides, and then Soralia coryllifolia. And then the very last product here is Rehmannia. As I said, I think there were several other ingredients, but just for the sake of the monographs and the pharmacology that is available for these, I chose these 6. So if we can start with teasel root. So teasel is a biennial herb. It produces a basal rosette of leaves in its first year, along with significant root development, and it overwinters in this phase of this basal rosette. In the spring of the second year, regrowth allows for the emergence and maturation of the flowering spike, yielding the seeds, which terminates further continuation, the progeny having been created for dispersion to continue the life cycle. So a classic biennial. Basal rosette in the first year, overwinters, second year sends up a flowering spike, produces seeds, then dies. Okay. That is very noisy.
Sorry, I'm just responding to the live chat here as Andrew's talking. I hope
it's probably
it's not coming through on the other end.
I'm sure it is. Okay. Although there's no disease by the name of osteoporosis in traditional Chinese medicine, according to its clinical manifestations and pathogenesis, it belongs to the category of bone withers. So withering bone. So this is just kind of part and parcel of TCM explanation of disease pathologies, and how this poetic kind of semi-romantic way of elucidating it allows people to picture what's really happening way more than if you were to read a physiology text or a pathology text, and you start getting into receptors and end products and et cetera, et cetera. So bone withers is a bone blight and bone marrow reduction. That's how the Chinese interpret it. Specifically, bone blight is equivalent to the degeneration and change of bone tissue microstructure, which is manifested by the thinning and fracture of bone trabeculae, thus changing the normal load function of bone tissue and increasing bone fragility. Now, bone marrow reduction corresponds to bone mass reduction, including bone matrix and bone minerals in equal proportion. So they see it as as an interplay of these two things. Now, modern studies of traditional Chinese medicine have found that the incidence of kidney deficiency syndrome was progressively higher with increasing age, and bone mineral content in human bones also gradually decreases. In addition, hypofunction of the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis with decreased levels of sex hormones can cause decreased osteogenic function, making bone tissue content less per unit volume. An intricate relationship exists between the kidneys and bone. Its parenchyma is that the kidney and its associated organs regulate bone formation and bone metabolism by secreting various hormones and cytokines. The kidney primarily influences the progress of osteoporosis by regulating the secretion of cytokines such as calcium and phosphorus and 1-alpha hydroxylase, as well as erythropoietin. Now, the kidneys regulate two processes, namely bone development and bone remodeling, through the excretion and reabsorption of calcium and phosphorus, and dysfunctional kidneys resulting in disturbed calcium and phosphorus metabolism will lead to osteoporosis. So there, 2,000 years or so ago, the Chinese kind of related osteoporosis as a kidney deficiency, and modern science has elucidated that fact that the kidneys are very intimately related to both calcium, vitamin D formation, and calcium deposition and bone health. So there you go. Modern science just shows what they knew 2,000 years ago as a romantic language to understand in pictures and words the process that was happening that we now talk about in scientific terms that are probably very confusing to most people. So it's a bone withers because it's a kidney yin deficiency.
I just want to check. We've had some comments saying that they cannot hear me on the show here, so I'm hoping that.
They cannot hear you.
Yeah, I can.
Typing back.
Michael,
Okay,
can you
cool.
hear my voice?
I hear you fine.
Is my mic working?
Yeah, you're coming across fine on the
Maybe
KMUD
my mic's not working. I'm number 3.
Yeah, no, you're coming. You sound great
Okay.
here on KMUD land.
All right,
Sound good?
It's just that because I can hear you responding to people online while we're live feeding this, I have a hard time thinking that the clickety-clacketing on the keyboard is not coming through this mic and is being picked up.
Well, I do have it on
But hey,
blocking.
I know, but your physical clacking on the keyboard.
But I have it blocking.
I wasn't
the
noticing the
feedback
physical clocking,
on the
but I'm also hearing you
live
just
stream
fine.
settings. Okay,
so
hopefully we're all good,
we
Michael.
should, yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank
Good. Okay, so so the kidneys then are the major organ generating the erythropoietin hormone. And erythropoietin can not only impulse bone marrow stem cells and promote their differentiation into osteoclasts, but also promote osteoclastogenesis in bone marrow monocytes. So chronic kidney disease can lead to a substantial reduction of erythropoietin production in kidney cells, thus a functioning of bone formation. And as we've said also that the kidneys synthesize 1-alpha hydroxylase to secrete active vitamin D 125 hydroxy D3, which binds to the specific vitamin D receptor on the osteoblasts and osteoclasts to maintain bone homeostasis by affecting bone metabolism. And research has revealed that after local injury to the kidney induced by radiation in rats, as an experiment here, the activity of renal, the kidney, 1-alpha hydroxylase is reduced and the hydroxylation of vitamin D is blocked, followed by disrupted bone metabolism and poor mineralization of the bone matrix. So that's been well shown in demonstrated experiments and proven beyond any question. Okay, so 1-alpha hydroxylase then plays an essential role in bone mineralization and maintenance of bone homeostasis. Now, the liver is the primary organ storing blood and controlling the growth of muscles. The essence, and this is Chinese again, and blood are the identical source, and muscles are complementary to bone. Under such a premise, the essence and blood can nourish the bone marrow, and the muscles can sustain the bones. This presents evidence of the synergistic effects of the liver and kidney in the regulation of bones. Now, these herbs that would be acting as progenitor type nourishing herbs would be termed kidney tonifying traditional Chinese medicines. So we mentioned a few in that initial formula. And again, they are Epimedium, grandiflorum, Dipsacus phelonum, the teasel, Salvia militarizer, Amarinara asphalloides, Soralia coryllifolia, and Romania glutinosa. Like I said, there were 3 or 4 others, but for the sake of exploring the pharmacology with well-documented evidence, I pulled out those 6. I'm going to mention some others here because, it's like anything else. I think there's probably more than 30 or 40 herbs that you could easily say would have osteogenic effects, would either have bone mineralizing effects, or any other parameters that would improve bone health. So this herb, it's actually termed a Chinese herb, is Drinaria fortunei. So over the centuries, traditional doctors in China developed a number of herbal formulas to promote bone healing in fractures, referred to as bone knitting herbs. Now, these specialized formulas were given to speed up bone healing in fractures resulting from farm work, martial arts training, wars, and construction work. Now, modern research has identified the physiological actions by which traditional bone knitting herbs work to rebuild bone tissues. Over time, a large body of contemporary research has focused on one particular herb that is particularly effective at restoring bone loss arising from periodontal disease. That's the herb Drinaria fortunei, and it's referred to in China as Gu Sui Bu, if I got that right, literally meaning mend broken bones. So whilst the Chinese patent formula for osteoporosis has been selected here for discussion of the ingredients and efficacy, there's also the cautionary principle. That you should blow up the microphone. There is also the cautionary principle regarding safety and side effects. It's okay, we're both still alive, it's no problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was. I think you must be grounded to something, and when you touched his microphone,
I can't hear what you're saying, Mike.
You need to put headphones on.
All right. So the following substances are implicated in iatrogenic side effects, and herbs and herbal formulas need to be managed by a licensed practitioner or people that know what they're doing. So whilst I've mentioned some of these herbs in that TCM formula, I'm also going to bring out some kind of precautionary principle iatrogenic effects that have been noted, and just to say that you can't just dive into taking these things if you listen to this and it's all good and you're going to be fine. It's like anything else, a little knowledge is dangerous, so be careful. And that's what we're in the business of doing, is basically consulting, and that's our ability. We've spent many years studying herbal medicine, and this is what we do. So
are you going to talk about some dietary and mineral supplements and those kind of things as well later?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you're focusing on the herbs right now.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, let's also let people know they're listening to KU Media Garberville 91.1 FM from 7:30 until 8 o'clock. At the end of the show, you're invited to call in with questions. And this month's subject is bone mineralization, herbs that work to support bone matrix, and osteoporosis and osteopenia are subjects which we really want you to avoid. And there's plenty that you can do Unfortunately, it does seem to be more prevalent in women. And again, this is the estrogen that women are still subjected to post menopause, because although they don't have the progesterone, which is the anti-inflammatory arm, they still, and every cell in their body is still capable of secreting estrogen in response especially to inflammation. So women are definitely a higher percentage of the osteopenia, osteoporosis group. It could also be argued perhaps that weight-bearing exercise and physical work lends males a better chance because the bones do definitely respond to exercise. So, exercise is definitely a big part of preventing bone loss, as is a good diet, as are herbs that will improve your odds, and many different nutritive elements. Okay, so I think just to quickly move on to I just wanted to bring out two compounds from two separate herbs. So we mentioned horny goatweed, okay? And most people have probably heard about this. It's definitely out there as an aphrodisiac. It's a $1 billion industry, probably. I don't know. We don't actually stock horny goatweed, but anyway, just to say, its use for virility and osteoporosis is kind of well documented, but it does actually contain several substances that are kind of questionable in terms of liver injury and liver toxicity. The main compound is icaricide. So this icaricide has definitely been documented for increasing ALT, AST, lactate dehydrogenase, and basically it does actually seem to, in concentrations, again, this is where I think you have to be careful. How much of this are you taking? How long a time period are you taking it over? It's like anything. I think too much of anything is probably not good. But this substance, icaricide, does have some kind of cautionary tales for people to be aware of. So if you are listening to the show and you're using horny goatweed as a kind of aphrodisiac, just do be aware that this compound does actually have some kind of negative side effects to it in terms of its inflammatory activity. So they've posited that the mechanism of hepatotoxicity may be associated with damaged cell structures, increased oxidative stress, and the induction of apoptosis. Okay, the other herb, Soralia coralifolia, contains, and as soon as I saw this name in Latin, I recognized the word soralen. So that's P-S-O-R-A-L-E-N. So a couple of Chinese researchers, funnily enough, found that soralen at 14 milligrams per kilo caused disorders in multiple amino acid metabolic pathways in rats, leading to liver damage. The mechanism involves the inhibition of the mTOR signaling pathway, which is implicated in mitochondrial damage, reduced liver regeneration, and inducing liver injury. A study has also shown that isosoralen at 60 milligrams per kilo per day has certain nephrotoxic activity, which can lead to a decrease in body weight of rats, an increase in kidney coefficient, and a significant increase in serum urea nitrogen content.
So it's both has liver toxic and kidney toxic, constituents.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Okay, and I guess I'm bringing it out there because I don't want it all just to sound like it's all totally safe and harmless. But I would also say that using any of these would be, in the short term, probably quite okay. And if used in small amounts. The other thing that I'm also aware of is that the synergistic effect of polypharmic formulas can offset the other herbs in the formula, can indeed have activity that may well block icaricide, for instance, in horny goatweed. It may well block the soralen in Soralia coralifolia. So it's not to say that they're going to cause damage. It is to say that there's plenty of ability for people out there listening to this show. Take a look at these herbs and see if on PubMed or Institute of Health or wherever else you get access to look for information in this day and age. There may well should hopefully be some good reported, documented evidence to give you more information.
I have a question. If there was a reason that you wanted the benefits that are potentially there, would it make sense to do one of them for just a little while and then do a different one and then do a different one, or are they hurting you in similar ways?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. There's nothing really stopping any one person from taking one of these herbs, and it doesn't even have to be either of these. I mean, teasel root, for example. I'm going to talk about teasel root next. It's got a huge amount of pharmacological data on its supportive benefit for osteopenia. Okay, so you probably don't need anything else if you were just to use teasel root. So yeah, you can probably try using these herbs and have them for a certain period of time and then switch it. But it's difficult to say whether or not in a multi-drug formula, it may not actually have a negative effect because of the synergistic or additive or protective effects of some of the compounds in the other herbs.
The classic example is dandelion. So furosemide is a diuretic, a orthodox diuretic that's used. And when doctors prescribe furosemide, they have to prescribe a potassium supplement alongside it because furosemide causes the body to leach potassium. So you end up with a potassium deficiency. Now, dandelion is basically furosemide, but dandelion naturally, as a green leaf, comes with a lot of potassium. So when you take dandelion leaf as a diuretic, and you have to concentrate, obviously, you can't just eat a couple of leaves and expect it to have diuretic activity. But when you're using dandelion leaf tea or dandelion leaf tincture, it comes with a lot of potassium, so you don't have to supplement that. So that's where, the polypharmac, like Andrew's talking about, becomes very beneficial in that it's already all together there in the leaf. You don't need to isolate things in order to concentrate them. You can concentrate an herbal medicine with alcohol and teas and decoctions where you're boiling it without having to separate the constituents and then end up with side effects. And that's probably one of the best examples.
Okay, you're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. KMD Galbaville 91.1 FM. From now until 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in. The number is 707-923-3911, and you can call that from anywhere in the world. Okay, so we'd love to hear from you. Okay, I want to carry on and just mention some other herbs first before we go into specifics. And horsetail, I think I mentioned it at the end of May in the program we did in May, but just to revisit some of the pharmacology about horsetail, because it actually does quite a lot more than what we traditionally know as herbalists as a herb fit for the purpose of connective tissue repair, for nail, for hair, for strengthening collagen. So, but there's a lot more going on, and some of the components there had research done on them, which I'd like to bring out. So, mentioned last May that the horsetail herb, if you look at a breakdown of its phytochemistry, the main substances that stick out are the ursolic acid, olenolic acid, betulinic acid. So these are some of the main kind of antioxidant properties within it. So the results of the antioxidant effect of Equisetum arvense extracts obtained with 4 different methods of assessment point out strong protective activity against free radicals, lipid peroxidation, and oxidative agents. Now, we mentioned lipid peroxidation in terms of lipopolysaccharide as this endotoxin, what was always known as endotoxin, and how laxatives and aperients, things that promote bile formation, things that get your bowels to move, will actually decrease your reabsorption of endotoxin from the gut, and that this lipid peroxidation is a kind of byproduct of reabsorbing this waste material for not having it move quick enough. Now, together with previously reported data, the obtained results provide an advanced knowledge of antioxidant properties for this herb. So according to the research, as I said, conducted by previous authors, ursolic acid 32%, olenolic acid 10.8%, extracted in Equisetum arvense can improve bone properties, calcium balance, and modulate vitamin D metabolism. Both ursolic and olenolic acid have been reported to stimulate osteoblastic differentiation and inhibit osteoclast formation in vitro. And this experiment shows significantly higher bone mineral density in the experimental rat analysis when 120 milligrams per kilogram per day dosing of the horsetail extract was used. I did also mention in May, I think at the end of the show there, I talked about an alchemical preparation of it for the water-soluble salts that's not typically well extracted unless you're making a decoction or you're decocting the herb and then you're making an extract from that. So a paper titled The Pharmacology of Equisetum arvense, published in the Journal of Pharmacy, Volume 7, Issue 2, Version 1, February 2017, listed antioxidant effect, showing a significant peroxyl radical scavenging activity. Now, two compounds, onitin and luteolin, isolated from the methanolic extract of Equisetum arvense, showed superoxide scavenging effects. So it's one of the main oxidants that are produced through daily life. So that's the first thing. This is all besides the bone building. What are you asking?
And I just this very week, I saw an article about luteolin where they were looking at mentally fit adults, and that the luteolin is impacted in the maintenance of the glial cells that form the blood-brain barrier, and that the one biggest link was gluteolin, and they mentioned celery and broccoli, but I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Horsetail
Well, I
too.
think, again, this is the Latin doctrine of signatures, and the names mean more than they just sound, but resida luteola, I think that is also a pretty high...
yeah, the traditional dyer's weed. That's actually,
yeah.
So I don't know how you prepare that for daily use, though. So please tell us.
Well, we can do some kind of a program on it, but I just wanted to cover some of the benefits that I didn't even. I mean, okay, so we study herbal medicine, and the traditional herbal medicine of European culture, lists horsetail really as a kind of silica-rich herb for diuresis, for bedwetting in children especially. Okay, but not just children, but for adults, especially women postpartum, where the muscles, become weak and lax, and, kind of dribbling and incontinence is kind of fairly common amongst post-child, bearing women. So we look at the kind of traditional clinical indications for horsetail, but there's so much more that even, when I was studying, you only have so much time, so you look at the indications or the contraindications for any given herb, and you kind of take them on board, and you move through and you graduate and you get into practice and you start working, you start using them. And if you're lucky, you get time to do extra research, and you start looking or specializing in certain areas. So, with Dr. Pete on the scene in 2007, we really got into endocrine herbs because he was totally up to date with everything to do with estrogen, progesterone, pregnenolone, thyroid, and the metabolism in general through thyroid activity. So that encompassed lots of things, whether it be, bone remodeling or muscle growth or brain cognition and that kind of stuff. So, and until you get into research, you don't really see this. And I think that's why doctors, they kind of graduate. They get a very crammed education and or indoctrination from some pharmaceutical companies about their products, and they don't really get too much time outside of that to do their own independent research on certain chemicals, whether it be phytochemicals or just regular chemicals that are part and parcel of pharmaceuticals. But there's a wealth of information if you spend the time looking, and that's what Dr. Pete did his whole life. He just spent time looking and digging and doing more and more research on these things. And so I found it very interesting to see that horsetail's other activities written by this paper that I mentioned, which was a 2017 paper. This was actually a professor, and it was written in the Journal of Pharmacy. So the antioxidant effect is the first thing. And as you said, Michael, luteolin.
And I just want to butt in there, if I can. Vegetables and fruits such as celery, parsley, broccoli, onion leaves. Okay, so like green onions. Carrots, peppers, cabbages, apple skins, and chrysanthemum flowers are luteolin rich, and that's from the National Institutes of Health, an article.
All right.
So just to pop that in there, like you were looking at that, Michael.
Okay, well, how about this then? Next is in anti-cancer activity, because they said that the compounds within the European horsetail here had anti-proliferative effects against melanoma cell lines.
And
So-
breast cancer. It's also
and breast cancer too.
known
Okay.
to be anti-breast cancer,
Yeah.
luteolin.
So whether or not the melanoma approach would be topical or internal, I'm not sure. But basically, if people want to check this out a little more, I'm sure you'll find some more information. Then an antimicrobial effect specifically against E. coli, but the concentrations were fairly high. Now get this, and this kind of rounds this up again and kind of joins the dots. Anti-diabetic effect. Okay. Now the results here showed that different doses of a methanolic extract significantly lowered blood glucose in test animals whose pancreas was damaged by the drug streptozocin. So they damaged these test animals first, damaged their pancreas. Obviously, the pancreas wasn't producing much insulin, so their blood glucose was uncontrolled. And then concurrent histological studies of the pancreas of these animals showed comparable regeneration after methanolic extracts of equisetum here, which were earlier necrosed by streptozocin, demonstrating a regenerative effect on the pancreas. So it can have a anti-diabetic effect because it specifically interacts with the pancreas to improve beta cell production. So that's pretty cool. And then anti-inflammatory effects, which you might expect with some of these.
Just as a little side note there for Dr. Pete fan listeners.
Okay.
I remember him saying to me that the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, damage the beta cells in the pancreas, and he thought that it was reversible because beta cells are the ones that make the insulin, and that he thought it was possible for those to regenerate once you severely decrease your polyunsaturated fatty acid intake in the diet, that your beta cells can regenerate. So it's not always diabetic. If you're diabetic, you're always going to be a diabetic. You can help regenerate some of those beta cells.
Yeah, he was fairly convinced that diabetes was a reversible situation. Okay, so the anti-inflammatory effects that were documented in this paper mentioned dermatological effects on skin disorders and positive effects on nail growth and strength, which you would imagine because the water-soluble silica compounds. Now, and a tonifying effect on the urinary system, corroborating European herbal medicine directives for enuresis, bedwetting, and incontinence of the urinary bladder, particularly useful for treating the incontinence associated with multiple pregnancies. Okay, and then there was also an inhibition of platelet aggregation with equisetum that was found, and its use in thromboembolic events was documented as treatable. And then lastly here, again, this is onitin and luteolin, the hepatoprotective effect when compared against milk thistle were even higher and attributed to these two compounds, onitin and luteolin, contained in horsetail. So a very useful herb, more specifically for bone health, definitely one that I would want in a formula, definitely one that would go alongside several other herbs that you could use that we're going to talk about. But again, just a little bit of cautionary principle. From a safety perspective, some information also exists to show an interaction with thiamine, as it contains thiaminase. Now, this thiaminase breaks down the vitamin thiamine. So long-term use perhaps shouldn't be used. It should be considered supplemental. Or indeed, you can take thiamine or take a break from continued use before retreatment. And also, it was noted that thiaminase is actually denatured by heating. So a decoction of horsetail would be good because it would do that. And in fact, if you did a decocted extract, that would probably be the best way of doing it. So you'd decoct your horsetail herb, and then you'd make a ethanolic extract from that, and you would get the best of both worlds. You would get the water-soluble contents would come out. The ethanol would pull out some other soluble compounds that wouldn't necessarily come out that well with water. and you'd actually denature the thiaminase in the product so that you wouldn't have that issue going down the road. I think that probably the same thing would also happen with an alchemical preparation, because you're heating, whether or not you're doing it in the beginning when you're pulling off the ethanol. So you have to heat the liquid menstruum once it's fermented to pull off the ethanol. You'd have to do the same thing when you want to pull off the essential oils. You have to heat the flask containing that kind of mark and the liquid that's in there to pull off the essential oils. Obviously, then at that point, you're going to reduce that to a fine powder when you take off the water by just gently heating it to get all that waste water off. And then you calcine that sludge in an oven, as I mentioned, at about 1,000 Fahrenheit for 6 or 7 hours. So in that alchemical process, there's lots of heat being applied. So, it's not the be all end all.
I just want to mention something. I think we didn't mention this in May when we had our show, but there's been a question on the chat that the horsetail that is used medicinally is not the water-loving horsetail that we have growing in our rivers here. The water-loving horsetail.
Definitely, it's toxic.
It's that has some toxic compounds, and we do not recommend you wild harvest your own horsetail unless you know exactly the little botanical points to look for on the actual stalk of the horsetail. So, Equisetum arvens is the medicinal one, and it's a field horsetail. It grows on dry ground. It does not grow in water. Just want to put that as a side note. I have it here in the chat on the live stream, but
is the water horsetail the one which has little?
Yeah, they all look like that. They they have a singular stalk with like a radial spikes coming out.
I have ones with no radial spikes coming out.
Just
just the stalk.
Just the stalks. Yeah. Well, the Equisetum arvens does have the little projections. What do you call them, Andrew? You're the one who has a botanical description language leaves. Down a little bit better than
describing
me. The leaves that are not really like a
modified leaves.
Yeah, the modified leaves, the little spikes.
Yeah, you're saying the ones that occur at each internode.
Yeah, at each internode,
like a little crown around.
Right. So Michael's saying he has the horsetail that's just a spike,
and that's a toxic one potentially.
That one is not Equisetum arvens, and the ones that do have the toxic compounds are the water-loving ones.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know exactly what species that is. We'd have to look it up in the Jepson manual.
I will bring you some.
But I would not. I'm just so cautious. I would just only use Equisetum arvens.
I have had that actually prescribed to me ages ago by a Reiki therapist, and I mean, she was a qualified person, and I actually harvested a bunch of that
and used it
successfully. And she also made what I had left over, she made and gave to other clients. So
okay, well, maybe there's a I just don't know, with the maybe like a lot of maybe you could do the water horsetail and not get, some people might not get sick, some people might get sick, so it's dosage.
Yeah, ours wasn't the water horsetail, it was just the other one, which may just not be as medicinal or something.
Yeah, I don't know, we'd have to look it up. And then that's the other thing too, is it might not be harmful at all, but there just might not be any research on it, right? So you don't know which one.
That's how I feel about so many of the shelf mushrooms and the stable mushrooms, the conchs, because all the research I've ever seen about any of them, and they're like, oh, this one cures hepatitis, and oh, this one is for breast cancer, and so there's a whole bunch which have no research.
Right, exactly.
But not a single one has ever been toxic, but we need more research on that instead of modern pharmaceuticals.
Really. I think it's happening all the time, because I think when we come across, and I found that even today, looking at some material, that some of the modern drugs that are coming out now, 2022 and 2023, are all based on plant metabolites, and it's not de novo creation, of these compounds. They collected plants in the wild, they've done trials of them, they've isolated this ingredient, and this ingredient is what they're patenting, because it's a isolated component, it's not the plant, and it all comes from plants, folks.
And when the patent runs out, they will add a hydroxyl unit, some innocuous place on it. It might be more toxic.
Exactly, like the estrogens, exactly.
Yeah, and I want to remind people, 923-3911, you still have time to call in.
Yeah.
Please don't wait to the very end, because you won't get on.
That's right. Okay, good. All right. So, as I mentioned, then, mentioned thiaminase, and that is potentially part of horsetail, but again, only kind of large dose, long-term chronic use. I mean, it would take a while. Okay, so as I mentioned, then vitamin B1 thiamine, whose phosphorylated forms is required for some metabolic reactions, including the breakdown of glucose and amino acids. The food sources rich in thiamine include nutritional yeast, nori, and liver. Dr. Pete was always a big fan of liver. We like liver, and it contains just about every vitamin there is, fat soluble and water soluble, and is really quite a superfood. But unfortunately, people get brainwashed, or it gets cooked badly and it just tastes strong or tough, and they just go off it at an early age. Okay, so to look at traditional Chinese medicine, it considers 3 phases when it comes to bone deformities. One, during the first phase, where there's harm to the blood vessels due to stagnation of qi and blood, and then the inflammation, which together leads to pain. Secondly, in the second phase, the inflammation eventually subsides and the pain is significantly reduced, but the bruises remain and connective tissues are not repaired. And the third phase, the overall bone damage has now been healed, but the remedy to pacify and improve bone regeneration and improve the internal environment has yet to be addressed. So we mentioned epimedium. It's been used for centuries to treat bone fracture and bone loss. Okay, it hasn't, they haven't talked about it in terms of an aphrodisiac effect, but as I mentioned, icarin as a prenylated flavanol glycoside isolated from epimedium, and has been shown to be the main bioactive component. So whilst they call this component the main bioactive component for treating bone fractures, studies show that it does promote bone formation by stimulating osteogenic differentiation of bone marrow-derived mesenchymal stem cells, while inhibiting osteoclastogenic differentiation and the bone resorption activity of osteoclasts. So furthermore, icarin has been shown to be more potent than other flavonoid compounds in promoting osteogenic differentiation and maturation of osteoblasts. And within the previously mentioned Chinese formula, besides target prediction and experimental validation, the binding affinity of coralin and icaritin for estrogen receptor alpha and beta was confirmed, showing the phytoestrogenic benefit of blocking estrogen receptors by substances having affinity for them without eliciting an estrogenic effect. Okay, so I think there's a caller on the air. Let's take this caller. And before we take the caller, let's just say it's 923-3911, 707 area code 923-3911. So caller, you're on the air. What's your question? Where are you from?
Harvey from Berkeley.
Welcome to the show. What's your question?
Well, on YouTube, I keep seeing these ads for this. It's looks like a bandage, and you put it on the bottom of your feet when you go to sleep at night, and it's supposed to take out all the toxins, and it's supposed to be Chinese herbs.
Well, one second, please. I think you have your radio on, because I'm getting lots of feedback through the headset. So do you,
I'm not. I don't have my radio on.
Oh, okay, good. Well, we're getting feedback, Michael, so I'm not sure what's...
Okay, well, basically, it's like something you put on your feet there at night, and you take it off in the morning, and it's black.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks out all the... And then they say after 10 days, when you don't see any residue there, that it's taken a lot of stuff out of your body, and they don't say what's in it. They just they just sell it.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking it up right now. I'd have to see what's in it. I have heard about this, but I've never really looked into it to see exactly what compounds
I would
are
say
in those.
Between the palms of the hand and the soles of the feet are probably two of the most completely invested with sweat glands, and certainly from a perspective of sweat bearing waste products, which is a function of sweating. It's not just evaporative cooling, which is also a main function in the heat, but that the salts that come out of the pores in the sweat contents, some of these salts may well be reacting with the...
It says it's bamboo vinegar, so that might be reacting with the salts from your sweat.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's definitely I know there's definitely a role to play for saunas and sweating in terms of detoxification. I think that's kind of
I remember asking Dr. Pete about saunas and said, what do you think? Do you think they're just wonderful things to go into? And he said, well, yeah, they're good. But if you sleep in a warm room, that's even better because your body detoxes at night.
And exercise.
Well, definitely. You're detoxing when you exercise too.
So were you using this for anything specifically?
No, I haven't used it.
Oh.
I had a friend who used it, and he recommended it to me. He said he bought several packages, and he wanted to give me one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't use anything unless I know what's in it.
Right.
I'm the same. I'm very wary of everything.
I would imagine that by law there has to be a supplement fact panel which would have to disclose.
It might not be on a topical application or a body care product. They might not put everything on there. The rules are much more lax. Okay, I think we have another caller.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for calling. Okay, we have another caller. Caller, you're on the air. Where are you from? What's your question?
Is that me? I'm calling from Garberville now, and I'm interested in Self-Heal.
Sure.
It's a local flower, and there seems like there are two different kinds, and wondered what your thoughts about harvesting while crafting the Self-Heal for the bones. And I'll take the answer off the air. Thanks so much for the good show.
Oh, yeah, welcome. Okay, so Prunella vulgaris is the plant that I'm most familiar with. It's European. I've seen a lot of Self-Heal here in gardens, but I do think that some of that has been imported. I'm not too sure about. I've never seen it really too much walking about.
Oh no, I have tons of it. It's one of the main weeds in the middle of the skid roads. I mean, it's all over the forest of Miranda.
I wonder if it is Prunella vulgaris. I mean, I think I know what you're saying. It's got that typical kind of labiate.
Perhaps it's a very closely related Western relative.
Yeah, quite possibly.
I'll bring you some of that too.
No, we have that. We have both. We have the ornamental because we have a lot of ornamental plants in our garden, but we also do have some of that, and it's taking over where some of the hawksweed is, which I was very happy about. But Self-Heal is definitely used topically to heal fractures like plantain is and comfrey. Hello? Sorry, I'm just not sure what was going on there, Michael.
Can you hear it just now?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, I don't know.
Just carry on.
That is very strange. This is not they're off. That's strange.
That's okay.
Okay, so Self-Heal is a topical application. What you do with topical herbs for healing injuries is you grind them up and you put them on the injury, and it's also good to put them with vinegar and sometimes even with horseradish once the injury is turned into like a cold fracture. So you have a hot fracture when you first have a torn tendon or a broken bone, and then hopefully you get that reset. And then when you're trying to heal it up, you want to take down the inflammation at first, and then you want to heat it up with freshly grated horseradish and cayenne pepper and these same herbs, Self-Heal, plantain, comfrey root, comfrey leaf. And that helps with vinegar, and that helps drive it into the skin. Maybe like those detoxification foot pads, if they really do have vinegar, that could be helping drive something else in or pull something else out.
Yeah, oxymels were always a traditional prescribing methodology with vinegar. Okay, you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, 91.1 FM, Garberville. From now until 7 o'clock, if anybody'd like to call in, you're very welcome. But we will be closing the lines down in a couple of minutes here because we're getting close. So anyway, let's carry on. We don't have too much time left, but I have a lot of material here to carry on. That I have to carry this on next month because I've hardly touched the herbs, and I was going to talk all about teasel, but I haven't yet. Anyway, okay, so the next one I wanted to do because it's not as long, and we have talked about it before, quite extensively for constipation. And again, this makes the link for improving bowel transit time, decreasing endotoxin, lipopolysaccharide reabsorption, and bone health. And that's Cascara sagrada. I do see the lights flashing there, so I'm not too sure if there is anybody wanting to squeeze in with a question, but I'll get told if they do in the meantime. So Rhamnus persiana, And it's mainly because of the imodin content. And we'll get into the pharmacology of this in a little bit. But like I said, it's getting close to the top of the hour. So the main thing with Rhamnus persiana, which does grow here on the Pacific Northwest, it's got quite an endemic small multi-stem tree. It must be aged for at least a year before manufacturing into a powder or extract. Now, I say powder as these are typically offered, but all extracts are much cleaner and safer, especially for long-term administration, being virtually devoid of all heavy metals associated with roots and barks. These metals, including mercury, cadmium, lead, and arsenic, as part of environmental degradation through pollution of varying sources, have been demonstrated by us during our GMP testing of raw materials versus the finished extracts that we produce. The metal loads testing is performed by ICP-MS, which is inductive decoupled plasma mass spectrometry, and is capable of detecting concentrations in parts per billion. We've shown a 4-log reduction in concentration of these metals once extracted into a raw essentially 99.99% cleaner, and even absent entirely from the liquid form. Now, as I mentioned, Rhamnus has positive osteogenic effects, increasing bone mineral density and increasing bone microarchitecture, no doubt through its anti-lipopolysaccharide effect and its bowel decreasing the bowel transit time, improving the clearance. So it's another good reason to use this herb for the treatment of constipation. Its activity as an anti-inflammatory for the bowel is valuable. The red free radical quenching pigment being responsible for these effects. So we'll kind of wrap up the show this evening, but we'll carry this on next month. I'll carry on with a little more research about imodin and the lipopolysaccharide, anti-lipopolysaccharide effects, and when we come back in August.
And a caller wanted to let them know that their chiropractor said the best to cleanse is to go stand in your ankles in the beach and let the waves wash over your feet.
All right.
Yes, it's very good also too for grounding, barefoot on the beach, and also getting all the ions off the waves, the crashing waves.
Okay, so you've been listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, K-Media Garbable, 91.1 FM, 21st of July, 2023. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray.
As I said, we're both licensed medical herbalists. We consult with clients about a wide range of conditions. We do Zoom consults and have done for a long time. Our website is www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com. And even those things that we have on our website, if those ingredients that we mentioned are not on the website, doesn't mean to say that we don't have them, because they're used for private practice. Anyway, so you can visit our site to see a list of our organic medicinal herb tinctures, and our contact details are there also.
Yes, we did have some inquiries for teasel and horsetail on the live chat.
Yeah, so people just go ahead and contact us by email. My name's Andrew at Western Botanical Medicine.
I'm Sarah at westernbotanicalmedicine.com.
And links to both our Twitter and YouTube channel are also on our website. And until August, the third Friday of August, thank you and good night.